Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to adjust the bearings on your longboard, put on new wheels, and how to prep it for spring. Great way to get around, cool way to get to sports practice, friend's house, whatever. As the weather is warming up, you've been walking everywhere all winter, you want to get around in style. Alright, so the first thing you're going to need is one of these tools. So I got this off Amazon for about $8. It's got 3 distinct bolts adjusting settings on it for essentially this one here. That's the largest one on the truck. Middle one for the bearings and the wheels. And the smallest one is for these little guys right in here. But something you can do to avoid getting a bearing like this, and it also makes it more difficult to take off your longboard. If it's rusted, it's going to lock up quite a bit. Simple way to avoid it is just by getting a pair of bearings that are good quality and rust resistant. So you've just put in your new bearing, you insert it through the face of the wheel always, and you're going to put the bolt on. So the thing with putting bolts on and tightening wheels, one thing you should be aware of is if you do it completely, like tightening anything with a thread, with a moving part in between the thread and the truck, you're going to be locking the wheel up completely if you tighten it too much, right? So the wheel does not move, so you tighten it so the bolt is not completely flush against the bearing. So there we go, that's moving pretty good. It's also really important to note that if you have newer bolts and newer axles, newer bearings and stuff like that, unlike mine, you really want to make sure that the bolt isn't too close to the bearing, because the bearing is a moving part, so it can actually unscrew that bolt, and I have had bolts fly off before. Normally it's not the biggest risk because it's unlikely that the wheel is just going to fly right off, but just something to be aware of, just keeping them in check. So the next 2 parts of this tool is the bigger part and the smaller part. You're going to take off this kind of rubber stopper that goes on here with a washer and another bolt, which is the largest one that you'll be adjusting. So this is attached to a threaded piece here. As you can see, super loose because I just took it off. But what this is the primary adjustment you'll be making to how much you want your longboard to turn and the handling of it. So, and then you'll notice the third one is the smallest feature on this tool, is these ones right here. So you can adjust those in 2 different ways, and we'll get into that. The second way, which is on the front, but on the back, you can adjust them just using this thing on there. The only reason you'd want to adjust those too much is just how tightly your truck is fastened into your deck, which does alternate the handling a little bit, but the primary thing that's going to affect it is this. I think the most important thing to note here, how this tutorial is going to be individualized to Canadians and people riding the longboards in Canada. When the snow melts, there's a lot of ice on the road and a stupid amount of cracks. Like, I can't count the number of times this season already where I've flown off my longboard just from hitting a crack in the road or whatever. So I personally, even in the summertime when conditions are a little bit drier outside, I personally like to have my handling on my longboard really loose. So I like it to be as responsive as possible to my foot movements. And the only time that I would tighten this up, so as you can see now, it's a little bit tighter. And if I loosen it, you're going to have a lot more freedom, not too much, but a lot more freedom with how much your board is able to move, right? So I think the reason that a lot of people would want it to be tighter is just for direct straightaways where they don't want their board to be moving too much. So the last thing we're going to talk about, now that we've discussed the bearings and the wheels and the truck adjustments, is the front of the board. So when you take a look at the front of my board, it is really not a great example of a type of board you should be riding in Canada in the springtime, basically because the grip tape is totally worn off. Now, I didn't actually have grip tape on this ever. I had essentially, it almost feels like sandpaper. I mean, grip tape is essentially sandpaper, but this was just an adhesive with sediment applied for like a layer. So basically it used to be the same design on the back. Yeah, feel free in the summertime if you want your board to be a little bit tighter, tighten it up just for straightaways. It can be kind of fun. Not moving around too much if you want to just stay as straight as possible. But for me personally, when I'm riding it in the springtime, I just like it to be a lot more responsive to my foot movements. I use this board for commuting, so it's pretty important that if I run into a patch of ice or a crack is like, you know, a couple inches in front of me and I just notice it, I want to be able to move out of the way quickly. And in order for your board to respond quickly, you're going to want a looser setting on your trucks. And I say it's the worst because when you're pushing, you're going to be picking up a lot of dirt and dust from the road salt, stuff like that. It's all very abrasive and it's going to rub this off. If you have actual grip tape, it's not going to come off from you pushing and just getting dirt onto your board essentially, right? So another thing is mud and dirt is going to be solidifying on the deck itself. And if you have grip tape, it adds a really great layer between the wood quality and just the elements essentially. So even if you have good wood quality like bamboo, like this is a bamboo board and I'm still having problems with it, especially now that I don't have grip tape on it. So I can't stress enough to have grip tape on your board. This tutorial isn't going to have any grip tape application, but that being said, I will be adding some on in the summertime because I need to get this board a lot safer, especially if you're riding it in wet conditions, melting snow. You're going to have a lot of water on the board and you're going to be fighting against the slipperiness below the wheels and on the deck itself. It's just not a good situation. In closing, those are my recommendations for riding your board in the springtime. Make sure you got good bearings. Check on them, I would say a couple times a year, because even in the summertime here, it's quite rainy and you never know like how corroded they could be. I got this board secondhand and my friend definitely did not tell me that the bearings were this corroded on them, right? So yeah, I would, just for safety reasons, take them off once a year, check out the axle, check out the bearings, maybe get a new pair of wheels, new bearings every once in a while, make sure they're rust resistant. Second, I would recommend having a loose setting on the trucks just so that way your board can be as responsive as possible to your footing, which is extremely important when the road conditions are still not ideal. Doesn't mean you can't ride your longboard at all, but it just means you have to be safe about it.